All right, so the first of the forms is going to be the cover sheet. John already went over this a little bit, but I'm going to go over it a little bit more. As he said, this is generated by the online application system. You will probably use multiple copies of this form, and the top section is auto-populated. So you'll just need to fill in this bottom section. And the purpose of this form is to help both you and to help us as the applicant and as the examiners processing your license. Because with alcohol, it's common for us to get envelopes with a check, just a check. No license number, no nothing. We have no idea what it goes for. And we don't know who to contact sometimes, and it makes things very difficult. So this helps us know where the documents are supposed to go. And furthermore, you can list in here the attached items that you're going to include so that we can verify that everything that you say that is on this cover sheet that should be attached is actually included. And we can contact you right away if we notice that any of the documents that you have listed or items that you have listed are not there. This next form is MJ00. We have given form control numbers to all of the forms that we have produced and that we provide for you to make it easy when we're speaking with you on the phone or emailing you to reference. So this is your application certifications. This needs to be completed by each proposed licensee and or affiliate. And so that means with one application, if you have 5 shareholders for a corporation that is applying for a license, each of those 5 shareholders is going to need to complete this form and submit it before your application can be deemed complete. And the reason for this is because we ask some questions that one person can't certify for other people. One of the questions, for example, is, do you currently have or plan to have an ownership interest in or a direct or indirect financial interest in another marijuana establishment license? And as you guys know, if you have, say, a retail store, if you're applying for a retail marijuana store, you cannot apply for a testing facility. So this is just kind of a heads up, and it may be that one shareholder has a stake in 2 different corporations that own 2 different licenses, and it's possible that the other shareholders may not be aware of that. Other things on the second page, these are all certifications that need to be initialed. So a lot of these certifications have to deal with the prohibitions in Article 1, for example, or in 1738. For example, I certify that I am not currently on felony probation or felony parole, or that I have not had a felony in the past 5 years, because that's prohibited by the statute, right? And how can one shareholder certify that the other shareholders do not have a felony? It may be that one of their partners has had a felony and has not disclosed that, because that's not usually something that people like to brag about. So that's why each applicant needs to submit one of these forms. On the third page of the form, are 2 different questions, and you're only going to answer one or the other. The first question is for those who are applying for a marijuana testing facility, and that you're going to certify. Sorry, not answer. And the second is for those who are applying for all other license types, and it's essentially saying that I'm not going to apply for a license type that is prohibited by statute. And then you'll see that there's a place for you to sign it in front of a notary. You will notice that for the forms that we provide, they all need to be notarized at this point. We are hoping eventually in the future, probably not this year, but maybe next year, that we will be able to have forms completed with an e-signature and done completely online, like your PFD. That's not an option at this point, so they do have to be notarized, but we're hoping in the future for that. And just for the record, we don't need original copies of the forms, so as long as you notarize it and we can clearly see that it's notarized, have it notarized, you may scan. We prefer that you scan and email these items to us so that we aren't flooded with tons and tons and tons of paper, because we have a relatively small office. So our next form is the general operating plan. This is required by all applicants for each license type. And the general operating plan has to be, every field has to be completed. Each field has to be completed. If you have a formal operating plan of your own that you have typed up and is nice and neat, and you would like to attach along with this, you may, but each field in here still needs to be completed answering that question. You will notice that on all of our forms, the first page looks very similar. This one is slightly different because it has a couple of fields on the bottom for the mailing address and primary contact, which should be identical to the information that you have included in your online application. But we like these to be uniform. The first section of this form talks about what is this form, and it will cite the statute or regulation reference that explains why this form is needed. We give a little bit of information on what this form covers. For this one, for your operating plan, there are different sections that cover security, inventory tracking of marijuana and marijuana product, employee qualification and training, waste disposal, transportation, signage and advertising, and a control plan for persons under the age of 21. This is a very long form. It's a 19-page form. And throughout the form, you'll see different kinds of questions. There are questions where we expect you to write answers, like the ones that you see on the screen now. And there are also yes and no questions. And these yes and no questions are all prefaced by a sentence that says, or a couple of sentences that say, all licensed marijuana establishments must meet minimum standards for surveillance equipment. Applicants should be able to answer yes to all items below. So that's a pretty good indicator that you should be able to answer yes to all of these things. If you find that you aren't able to answer yes to every single one of these questions, then you're going to need to review your operating plan, make some adjustments to your operating plan or to your proposed premises so that you can meet these operating requirements. And at the end of this operating plan and a couple of the other supplemental documents, the very last page says additional space is needed. So if you don't have a formal operating plan and you run out of space in one of the sections to answer that question, fill it out as much as you can, and then at the end just say see attached page, and you can print out as many copies of this last page as you need. So this next form is MJ02, and it's your premises diagram. And again, you'll recognize the first page, the familiarity of the first page. We have a yes or no question asking whether you're going to attach your own blueprints or CAD drawings. We want to make that option available to you because the second page of this form is an empty box. And some of you, I'm sure, are fabulous artists. I am not. So I would, if I were applying for a license, be attaching blueprints or CAD drawings so that it's very clear what my proposed premises is going to look like. You may use this box, of course, but if you would like to attach other diagrams, you're more than welcome to. The first page is mandatory. The second page is not necessary. So please just indicate in the yes or no question if you intend to attach your own diagram. If you do attach your own, please make sure that you meet the requirements of what needs to be included in your premises diagram. Those requirements are listed briefly on the first page and a little more in detail on the second page. You must show all entrances and boundaries, restricted access areas, storage areas, and the dimensions. Certain license types may have additional requirements for what needs to be included in your premises diagram. For example, a cultivation license, you'll need to indicate what areas you plan to have under cultivation, particularly for a limited cultivation license, since it's restricted to 500 feet. It's very important that that is indicated in your diagram. So the next set of forms are labeled MJ03 through MJ06. So depending upon what license type you're applying for, you will be filling out one of these 4 forms, unless, of course, you're applying for multiple license types, in which case you will apply for the use the corresponding form. I'm going to use MJ04 as an example here, but just for your reference, MJ03 pertains to retail marijuana stores. We picked 03 because it corresponds with Article 3, which deals with retail marijuana stores. MJ04 is marijuana cultivation facilities, and the limited cultivation facilities will also use this. MJ05 is for the marijuana products manufacturing facility and the marijuana concentrate manufacturing facility. And MJ06 is for the marijuana testing facilities. So on these supplemental operating plans, you'll need to complete these and include these in addition to the general operating plan. So each license type has additional requirements for what needs to be included in the operating plan in addition to the general operating plan. So we decided it would be easiest to create separate forms for those instead of having in the general operating plan, if you're applying for this license, answer these questions, etc. So some of the things that you'll see covered in your supplemental operating plans are things like prohibitions. For this one, it also includes your cultivation plan, odor control, testing procedures and protocols, and additional security questions. So this next form is MJ07. It's your public notice posting affidavit. So as we've said a couple of times, as you know, the public notice includes a 10-day posting of the application at your proposed premises and at a conspicuous location nearby. So once you have completed that 10 days, you are going to fill out this form. And we do not want pictures. We get this question all the time in alcohol because they have an identical posting requirement. We do not want pictures of showing that you posted your application. We don't need the copies of the application that you posted. All that you do is complete this affidavit, it's a sworn statement, of course, saying that you have met those requirements, and you're going to fill in the start date, the end date, and then the second conspicuous location that you have posted those applications for the public to be informed. And of course, you're going to sign in front of a notary once you have done this. Please don't fill out this application until after that 10 days is complete. We see people certifying that before their 10 days is complete in alcohol, and we make them redo their posting affidavit because you can't swear that something has been done before it's done, right? So the next form is this local government notice affidavit, MJ08. And this is where we ask that, or we require that you notify your local government if you are located within one, along with the community council for applicants applying for a license in the municipality of Anchorage or within the Mat-Su borough outside of city limits. And the reason for this is because we at the agency and your local governments get tons of questions for alcohol licenses saying, hey, I saw this ad in the paper. These people are applying for this license in a hotel off of 4th Avenue. What is this? And with alcohol, we don't have a pre-notice requirement that they inform us before they start doing their publication. And so the public usually knows about applications before we do with alcohol. So for this, it gives us a heads up, and it gives your local government a heads up that you intend to apply for a license. And furthermore, it also creates a line of contact with your local government. So as I said earlier, as I was going through the flow chart, you will want to contact your local government to find out what specific requirements they will have in addition to our state licensing process. So it gives you that form of contact with them. So once you have notified them, you can either send a copy of that application, the same application that you're going to use for your posting. You can either email them a copy of it, or you may mail it. Some places may let you hand deliver it. But you'll want to contact your local government to figure out what the best way to get that information to them is. Once you have notified them, you'll write in this line who you sent it to and the date that it was submitted. For Anchorage and the Mat-Su, you're going to also enter the community council, who you notified at the community council. And then again, you'll sign this in front of a notary saying that you swear that you have met those requirements. So this next supplemental form is not a form that we provide for you. It's even easier because you don't have to fill out anything. This is your affidavit of publication, and it is produced by the newspaper who runs your ad. So after those 3 weeks are complete of once a week for 3 consecutive weeks of your advertisement, notifying the public of your license application, then the newspaper is going to produce this affidavit for you, and they'll either mail it to you or you can go pick it up. And a couple things that you'll notice on here are a copy of the actual advertisement that was posted, or that was published, I'm sorry. And the dates of publication are listed in there so that we can ensure that those dates are correct, or that you met the requirement, excuse me. And it's almost always notarized because you've got the newspaper certifying that you have met the advertising requirements by going through their paper. So this is Form MJ09. It's your Statement of Financial Interest. We have one of these for alcohol as well. This form is essentially a sworn statement that no person other than a proposed licensee has direct or indirect financial interest in the business for which you're applying for a license. A second certification listed on here is that any ownership change shall be reported to the board as required by regulation. This needs to be submitted by each applicant, each proposed licensee or affiliate, just like that first form that I showed you, MJ00. That's required by regulation, so we will have multiple copies of this form for many of you. Oh, and just for the record, you see there's a Social Security number field on there that will not be available to the public, of course. So the next required supplemental form is proof of possession of proposed premises. We fondly refer to that as POP at AMCO because it can be a tongue twister. So this is a deed or a lease. So at the time that you apply for your license, we must receive a valid signed deed or a lease and showing that you have right to possession of the proposed premises. Now, a couple of key things to note that we see being errors in alcohol are, say you're part of a corporation, or say I'm part of a corporation. I'm part of Marijuana Control Board, Inc., and I'm 100% shareholder of Marijuana Control Board, Inc., and I'm applying for a license. I need to make sure that my deed or my lease shows Marijuana Control Board, Inc. as the lessee or as the owner of that property. If it says that Sarah Oates is the owner of that property, then I, Sarah Oates, will have to create a lease to Marijuana Control Board, Inc. to be the entity that has the right of possession for that property. And so it's basically a matching game. View it as a matching game. Whatever you list on your initial online application as the proposed licensee, so the owner name that's going to be listed on your license, that is who should be listed as the entity or the individual who has right to possession of that property. Another thing is please make sure that the address that you have listed on that document matches the address that you have listed on your application. There are a lot of places that have a lot or block number for your deeds. Within the municipality of Anchorage, and I believe also the Matsu Borough, there are online tools that have a connecting document for those that say lot. If you enter in your physical address, it'll pop up the lot and block number, and you can print that and include it to have the dots connect. But you know, we have no way of knowing otherwise that lot 4, block 7 is the same as 550 West 7th Avenue. So please make sure that there's a paper trail connecting the dots so that we can see that, yes, you do in fact have right to possession of that specific property. So the next required documents are your entity documents. And how many of you are familiar with Snow City downtown? Okay, so we are using their LLC as an example here, and I'll explain why in just a second. But so as you see here, there are different shareholders listed. There's the mayor with 6.5%, who I'm guessing won't be applying for a marijuana license. You've got a couple of other shareholders with 9-10%, and you've got one who's got 56.88%. If you add up these numbers, they are not going to equal 100%. And the reason for that is because division of corporations only requires that you list your shareholders with 5% or more. That is not consistent with the AMCO requirement for a marijuana license that you list all of your shareholders. Because of HB 123 passing that says that no licensee with any ownership may have a felony in the past 5 years, we have to know 100% of the ownership of your license. So you do have the option with division of corporations of listing all shareholders. They may not put those on their website for you to see on this page right here, but there is a place down lower, which you can't see in this screen, where you can click on different links and it will bring you to a copy of the paperwork that you submit to them, and that would show all of the shareholders. So there is a requirement that you guys list 100% of the shareholders, whether they have 1% or 0.5% or 100%. You need to list them all, and we are going to require that you submit a copy of the paperwork that you send to Division of Corporations to us. So that way we can see that you have listed all of those shareholders and we know exactly what's going on. At this point, our online application system doesn't have a section for you to enter in the percentages of stock owned by shareholders. We're hoping to have that in the future, but we don't have that right now. So it's really important that we can see that through your Division of Corporations documents. So next up is your fingerprint cards. And one fingerprint card is required for each proposed licensee or affiliate. In alcohol, we have people submit 2 cards or 3 cards or 4 cards for one person, and that's fine. You can do that. And some people do that because they're afraid that 1 or 2 of their fingerprints may have been smudged on their original card. It's very important that the prints are clear. Most of our approved fingerprinters in the state do a great job of doing fingerprints. Some of them not as much, especially the ink roller ones, and they do get smudged. When we receive these, we send them over to the Department of Public Safety, and they do the background checks for us. And we have about a dozen or so cards get returned to us every year by the Department of Public Safety because the fingerprints are unreadable, and we have to then contact the licensee or the applicant and say, you need to resubmit your fingerprint cards because we can't read them. So we don't want you to have to go to a fingerprinting place and pay for them twice. So please make sure before you walk out of there that they're clear and you think we'll be able to read them. And so that's going to bring me to the next slide, which is your fees. So your fingerprint fees are $35 per person. So if you submit 6 cards for one person, it's still $35 for that person. And that $35 is not a fee that we keep. We are charged $35 per person by the Department of Public Safety, so we forward that over to them. As many of you are aware, a new application fee for all license types is $1,000. And your license fee varies depending upon the type of license that you're applying for. So there are 3 license types for each. The 3 license types that are $1,000 are your limited cultivation license, your marijuana concentrate manufacturing facility, and your testing facility. And so the retail marijuana store, your standard cultivation facility, and the marijuana products manufacturing facility license are each $5,000. And we do accept, as John said earlier, credit cards, Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, and you can pay those online. That's easiest for everybody, I think. So we're going to take questions at the end, and I would love for you to ask that question at the end because that's a great question. And it is in the regulations. So if you look at Article 1, the end of Article 1, it tells which fees are refundable and which aren't. We also take checks, and we're going to take cash. So this last slide is your resources, and I may have not articulated this earlier. I think John did a little bit, but please, please, please use your resources. So Washington has 300 people to do all of their marijuana and alcohol. For our licensing section in Alaska, I have 4 examiners plus me. to do all of alcohol and all of marijuana. We have 1,875 alcohol licenses, and who knows how many marijuana licenses we're going to have, but there's not going to be a limit, right? So we could have just as many or more. So please use these resources before you pick up the phone, before you send an email, because it's been crazy. The first is obviously our website. If you don't know this already, please write it down, or this will be made available to you. You can always Google ABC Board Alaska or Alcohol and Marijuana Control Office Alaska, and it should bring you to our homepage. Or like this gentleman in the front's doing, take a picture. Take a picture of this slide. The second is our checklist. Oh, sorry, I want to articulate on our website a little bit more. If any of you were following our website a year or two ago, you would have noticed that we didn't really update it super often. Once every board meeting or so we would update it. Now we update it a lot, and we're going to continue to be updating it very regularly. Please use this as a tool. It will be very helpful for you. We're going to have a lot of resources on our website, which are listed below. So the checklist, it will be made available on February 24th. This is going to be a checklist for the documents that you're going to need to submit. We have multiple variations of the checklist all over the place. It'll be on your online application system. It's in other places on our website, but we're going to have a copy that's going to be a PDF that you can print out, so you can check it off or do whatever you want with it. We're also going to have some detailed application instructions. We have a set for alcohol. We're going to have probably a more detailed set for marijuana. They're almost complete now. Those will be available to you on February 24th. Please use those. They should be very helpful for you for filling out the applications and the forms. If I don't expect you to remember 100% of what we've reviewed here today, but we are recording this, as Cindy said earlier. We've got 2 cameras going, and we are going to put a recording of this video. We're going to have a couple of videos available on our website for you to also reference. And John had mentioned that our admin assistant, Joe Samaniego in the back, produced this beautiful flow chart for us. So this is similar to what I went through with you at the beginning of the presentation about the whole process, all of the steps of the process. Please feel free to print this out, because this will be a great resource for you, so you know what's coming up next, or you know what to anticipate. And then our frequently asked questions. We've got a bunch of frequently asked questions on our page. We're going to be updating those frequently. At this point, we can only guess the kind of questions that we're going to be receiving about the application process. We probably have a pretty good guess about what we'll be receiving. But once we actually start taking applications, after February 24th, I'm sure our inboxes are going to explode. And so we're going to continue to update this very, very frequently. Please use these frequently asked questions, because a lot of the questions that I have people walking up and asking me are answered on our website. And lastly, if you have exhausted all of our resources and still have a question or need assistance with your application process, you may send an email to marijuana.licensing@alaska.gov. If you have licensing specific questions, like application questions, please use that email. If you have questions that aren't specific to the application process, just general questions or a question or a comment about the regulations, we have another email address that is just marijuana@alaska.gov. So please use that too. As many of you heard at our last board meeting last week, we presented to the board the marijuana mailbox. They'll be getting that at each board meeting, and that's going to be any questions or comments that we receive at the marijuana@alaska.gov email. All of those are going to be presented to the board at each meeting, so keep that in mind when you are writing to that address. And if you have any questions about things like local zoning laws or building code requirements, we don't have those answers to those questions. So I would ask that you work with your local government and work with your local fire department or food safety department to answer those specific types of questions that aren't addressed in our regulations.